if anything was going to happen, it would have happened by now. In one of Johnson's briefings last week, there was a list of industries that were not going to be able to open for business in the near future and how they'd be affected. And they included nail bars, tattooists, piercers, etc. And theatre wasn't even on the list. So it wasn't looking good. So I have to say that, you know, there was a lot of campaigning last week. There was a lot of really, really terrible and heartbreaking announcements from some of our most beloved arts institutions about redundancies and job losses and possible closures. Nuffield Theatre in Southampton said that they were going to have to close. That has huge implications for that town, for all regional theatre. Any town that has a theatre in it, you know, brings in people into that town in a way that can't really even be quantified. You know, when we talk about the arts, it's very difficult because, you know, it can sound quite wafty, you know, and I think a lot of people's idea when you talk about sort of arts and cultural industries is sort of Dame Judy with a cardigan over her shoulders and, you know, and the Royal Opera House and Glamborn, and nothing wrong with those things at all. What you don't realise is that we're talking about a workforce and a thriving unionised workforce. And the cultural industries is a huge, huge employer of people. It contributes, I know I hear different figures for this, but the figure that I've heard is £23 billion a year into the economy. We receive from GDP 0.3%, which is obviously a tiny amount. Our jobs are jobs that can't be automated. They can't be done by robots. You know, in terms of the government's idea of levelling out, moving forward from coronavirus, you know, our industry is an industry peopled by human beings, very much so. So, you know, it's robust and it's real and it's full of people who are not just actors and musicians and dancers and singers. It's also cleaners and electricians and people working stage doors and cafes, people serving behind the bar and running the courtrooms. It's people who are doing incredible community outreach work, who are absolutely, you know, healing the people in our towns and cities at the moment as they work their way through this virus. So it's really important to remember that, you know, it isn't some, I saw quite a lot of stuff on Twitter about all the arts, you know, and like it's some fancy pants thing, and it's so much more than that. So in terms of the announcement, we were all absolutely thrilled about it. I can't lie. It was a huge relief to hear that announcement on Sunday night, but there are some really, really major questions still to be asked about it. That money sounds like a lot of money, but it is, you know, it's a small pot for a very, very large amount of people who are going to try and access it. So the questions are about distribution, who will receive that money, the speed of distribution, because time is absolutely of the essence now. How we are going to look after our huge self-employed freelance workforce moving forward. 70% of our industry is self-employed and they are not being looked after in this at all. I know Sarah will talk more about this, and everyone probably. It's a huge problem. You know, and in terms of the hardship grants that are coming forward and all the different rescue packages, that immediately comes from a place of inequality. It assumes a level of bureaucracy literacy from us all that a lot of people don't have. So there's a real anxiety across the industry that the big organisations who have the infrastructure to appeal and to apply for those grants and for that money will eat it all up, and the more grassroots organisation and the individual artists and tiny venues, music venues, for example, will go without. The final thing in the sort of package and the big question that has to be asked, and I know that all our panel will be talking about this tonight, is about equality. You know, there have been strides forward in the last few years in terms of people getting a place at the table, you know, that has been long fought for. And there is real anxiety now that there will be the low-hanging fruit in this, that they will go, that theatres and venues will have to play safe, and so get just like your classic big names in, you know, white, middle-aged, mainly male, able-bodied. It's not looking good. We need to keep our eye on the ball with that. We're very, very lucky in that Equity is a fantastic union, as is Bectu. Our new General Secretary was announced today, and he's really good news. He's already done incredible work on Equity's 4 pillars moving forward, which is workplace safety, equality, infrastructure, and what was the other one? And safe opening, when we can open safely and how that's going to be possible, and the support that's going to be there for that. So that's the overview of it all. It's in terms of like what the arts are in our country and what it means, and also the huge economic contribution we make and how we can distribute this rescue package equitably. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I have to kind of hold my hands up and say so much of what you'd said there. This is like the point of the show though, isn't it? I hadn't thought of. You don't think of like, oh, okay, so that has to be distributed, but who is going to be in the best position to be applying for the package, to be working out how to get the most amount out of the pot? What are the rules? What about those, you know, community groups that are doing amazing, like empowering work through performance with, you know, vulnerable young people or whatever? It takes a while, doesn't it, to think about the ramifications of this, and that's why I think it's really hard. And I don't know, Julie, if you want to say anything about this before I come to you, Sarah, is it's really hard because you don't want to sound like a negative Nora. No offense to any Noras out there whatsoever, but very often as anti-austerity campaigners, I want to see this government removed. You know, I have absolutely no doubt that they are harmful to our class and our communities, but they announce a package like that, and then you kind of come in and like, oh, well, what about this and what about that? And you can see people thinking, well, can you just be grateful, for goodness sake? But actually, the consequences of not having that eye, as you've just talked about, the consequences of literally doing nothing and just go, oh, let us be grateful for it, is that so many lose out. And actually, so many of your colleagues, so many of the people that you love in your industry will be struggling, you know, really struggling with their income, especially with, you know, lots of people being freelance contracts or self-employed. So I don't know if you want to say anything before I move on. We obviously want to be positive about the announcement, but we have to campaign to make sure that those facilities in working class communities are able to keep going, even though they persevered through, you know, a decade of austerity, that they are supported.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, Laura. I just think that it's, you know, there is gratitude across the industry, but also I think we need to acknowledge that it was a victory too. You know, from the government not even mentioning theatre on that list a week before to them offering a 1.57 billion rescue fund. You know, that's a huge step in the space of a week. And it's come from campaigning. It's come from, you know, making our voices heard and, you know, really stepping up as a community, as an artistic community, and standing in solidarity with each other. Because, you know, when you're talking about the cultural industries, it's a huge part. It's not just theatre. All of us here today, we're very much theatre people, but it's also music venues, it's cinemas, it's museums, it's art galleries, it's TV, it's film, it's radio. You know, it's absolutely massive, and you know, and it's a standing together and actually saying, we are going to lose. You know, we show off all the time about being world beating, and you know, the industry is one of the only burgeoning industries in this country. We show off about all that all the time, but we are in danger of losing it. We really, really are. And for towns with tiny regional theatres that are part of the touring circuit, it's devastating. I mean, it will be absolutely devastating. Quite on top of the job losses, you know, that they were talking about 400,000 before this package. You know, it's what it will do, you know, within that infrastructure of a town, with people not coming in and using the bars and restaurants and hotels that people will use when they come to visit a theatre there.
I think Elizabeth Jane, I don't need to say this, but Elizabeth Jane said, Julie, you make so many valid points, and thank you so much for using your energy. I saw the campaigning that you were doing, Julie, in the run up to that announcement, and you are absolutely right to say that was a victory for everyone that stood up, that took those slots on the media, that spoke out, that talked about the hardship. I'm going to cut.
One thing, because I spent all weekend making like a campaign video, and I got some really, really exciting, like big names to do it. It was like the most exciting weekend of my life. I've never had as many famous faces in like one of my like little videos, and it was all nearly ready to go. I was just waiting for a couple of videos back Sunday night, and the announcement came. So a bit too sweet for me, because I'm not used to getting what I want. I'm not used to it. It's all something like, also the thing I'm campaigning for, we've got.
One.
I had to text everyone and say, there'll be other battles, I'm sure. Just whole battle.
Stand down. you won, Julie. And let's make sure that we keep our eye on it. Sarah, I'm coming to you next. Sarah is a freelance performer, theatre maker, writer, facilitator, and producer. We would love to hear your take on this crisis, its impact on you, and your take on things generally. Over to you, Sarah.
Cool. I've written some notes, so if I'm looking like this, it's just that I'm reading some things. I think firstly I'll start by saying I recognise why I'm sat here on a panel, because I'm doing all right, and I get invited to things, and I get to meet people, and I've got friends and fellow artists who've supported me when I've needed to isolate, and that's not the case for everyone. So I'm by no means at the top, and I'm still terrified of what will happen to my work, my income, my situation, my sector. But I think it's important that we all check where we are, especially in times of crisis. So drama and storytelling is humans making meaning. And there is so much to understand right now within our sector and within ourselves and society. Freelance artists, particularly those with identifiers that form a minority within the sector, have been pushing for decades to be where they are, to change the power balance from the inside, to ensure that the arts doesn't reflect just one type of voice. But my fear is that the pandemic is going to set us right back. As freelancers, like Julie was saying, freelancers make up 70% of the industry, and yet many are in such precarious positions, and the pandemic has only highlighted that. We're close to losing not just one generation of freelancers, but many. And I fear that our working class, our women, our Black, our Asian, our Indigenous, our disabled, our deaf, our queer, LGBTQ+, our neurodiverse freelancers who have been the last ones to get their foot through the door will be the first ones that have to leave, because we need to know where we are, that we can pay our bills, look after our families, put food on the table. And of course, the parents who, without regular income or affordable childcare, will be forced to leave the sector. And plus, there's the potential that the lack of inclusion of the arts and education will leave a whole generation of children and young people bereft of accessible art, drama, culture, and creativity. So the government grants and loans announced were an amount more than the sector imagined. And I know what you're saying, Laura, but as Julie was saying, we are so grateful for that, because it is a much needed acknowledgement of the importance of arts and culture. But like Julie's saying, we're still waiting on the details, because the arts is a bit, it's difficult to discuss as a whole, because we're not a monolithic group. We're not one size fits all. So we know this package of support isn't going to save everyone, but who it does save is really important, because for many people, we are beyond crisis point. The how, the transparency, the processes are all vital details, because processes often and regularly do exclude those people who need the support the most. Those people who don't speak the arts language, have the experience or the connections, can feel lost in the process of applying for support. So how can we ensure that this crisis package reaches the hands of the people who are most vulnerable of falling off the edge? I keep hearing the phrase, oh, when things go back to normal, as in the way they were before. And I'm not sure I want to do that, because I want to see a better, more inclusive, more caring, more considered, more exciting, more open arts sector. Rather than talking about gatekeeping and power imbalance, I want to see this time being used as an opportunity for change. And at a practical level, in a post-pandemic sector, will these surviving institutions be better at working with us freelancers? You know, not asking for information with next day deadlines, making us sneak off in our temp jobs and send emails, risking getting sacked from the one source of stable income we actually have. Will it be better at writing policy, prep time, deadlines and response timelines, even on their website, so we're not chasing for their information unpaid? Will they be better and more efficient at paying us? Because over the last few months, I've heard from too many freelancers waiting to get paid for pre-lockdown work. In the post-pandemic world is an opportunity to change our thinking and be better. As the arts ecology had so many barriers for people in the pre-pandemic world, so let's not go back there. We need to rebuild it and be part of that building, part of that rebuilding. As we need to be considering access at the initial idea stage of projects. We need contracts in plain English. We need our fees to reflect the fact that we don't have sick pay, holiday time, or any sense of security or stability. And we need all people to feel like a theatre, a gallery, a music hall, a museum is their home. It's not a treat. It's not a place we get dressed up for. No, these are places, central places, community spaces where, as audiences, we work. In those spaces, we challenge ourselves, we lose ourselves, we learn about and we rebuild ourselves and society. So no more stuffy, uncomfortable, unwelcoming, inaccessible spaces. As the old world is about to crumble, and this is an opportunity to restructure it, because we will always need to connect. And we will always need stories, and we will always need each other. The end.
I was just like, yes, so good. You've like made me feel at home to say I'm not always feeling at home in those spaces. And as a working class person, going to something like that was definitely like a big treat. And like going with the school to like a theatre was such like a lush feeling. And I do think there is like a sense of alienation for lots of working class people in those spaces, especially some of the barriers that you have to kind of let down and some of the feelings that might emerge from the performance and what that elicits. So you kind of stimulated so much. I loved it when you said it's about humans making meaning. And you're absolutely right that where we are right now, people need help with that. The change is exponential. And I don't know if any of you have felt like this, but as like an activist as well, it's like you're watching the harm in live time. We're not talking about historic events. It's like loved ones going through this right now, people in our class going through this right now. And I particularly loved, and other people did too, Teresa Easton, for example, said Sarah is voicing exactly the same stories that she hears as a regional organiser with the Artists Union in England. It's one of the reasons they've been working on a good practice charter for artists that sets out minimum standards at work, time to restructure what's going on. And I think, Sarah, your point about, this money not being a subsidy for the old system, that there has to be demands made through and with this money, that exploitative practices that you just described of having to like scrabble around for information, unpaid time, classic exploitative practice where your labor, so your preparation time, is not valued, and essentially brings down the overall hourly rate of all of the work to sometimes below the minimum hourly rate of legal pay, for goodness sake. so many people love what you said, Sarah. I mean, we are gonna think about this more broadly. Julie said flipping brilliant, Sarah, and I agree. That I suppose, what would you say to working class people right now that are kind of might be still in a place of rolling their eyes at the arts being helped at this time? Let's just, be honest.
I think it's hard because the arts is always picked against something else. It's like, oh, well, why are we giving it to the arts when the hospitals need it? It's like, yeah, hospitals do need it, but it's not an either or system. It's, we actually need to rebuild lots of systems from the start. And I think what's really difficult is that barrier of like not feeling comfortable in those spaces. It's like, well, that's not for me. You don't make me feel like it's for me. So why should my taxes pay for it? And I get that. But actually, like, one of the best things I've seen is a theatre where people, they weren't going to see theatre. They just brought their lunch in. They were just having their lunch. They were just doing a picnic in a theatre because it's a public building. And I was like, yes, it's public space. You use it how you want to use it. And actually, when you're using that space and you're welcomed in that space, you're much more likely to take a risk on whatever's happening in that space and feel trust, because I think that's often what we lack in the arts, all the different types of arts, but particularly theatre, is that sense of it's not for me. But once we feel that, because it should be, I think it isn't always. And like, I work in theatre and I don't often feel welcome in theatre venues, which I always think is really interesting. Like, oh God. So I think once we get back to that real sense of actually, this is for us, this is ours, and this is what we want it to be like. Once we feel welcome, once we feel at home, I think there will be less of that, why are we spending it on this when it should go to this? We'll be picked against things less because we'll feel like it's ours.
Exactly. And I think that is a very poignant point for all of the activists listening who have to have these conversations and be in defense of all different sectors. It is not an either or. There is money for all of this, and every single worker in each sector is valued. I'm going to come now to two other contributors, Shirley Houston and Melissa Johns. They are co-founders of the Disabled Artists Networking Community. Both are actors working in TV and theatre, and we're going to hear from you about your take. It's the kind of the richness of the conversation is building as we go. I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to say. It's over to you.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, one of the reasons why we set up Triple C, which is the host organisation of DANK, is exactly what we're talking about here, is the importance of grassroots connection with people in the community, wherever you are starting your career, or even whether your career is never going to be anything to do with the arts. The arts can play such a fundamental importance in so many people's lives. Triple C was started to connect disabled people to the arts because, for example, disabled young people in residential disabled schools, most theatre companies won't come to them. There's a lot of areas for disabled young people where the arts don't connect because we're seen as a barrier. And what we were trying to do is set up an organisation that affects each level: education, outreach, community and professional. So Melissa's going to tell you more about DANK, our professional strand.
Thanks, Shirley. Yeah, and I just want to say, Sarah, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, there's no worries if we don't cover everything in this bit, is there? Because that was just brilliantly done. Yeah, DANK is the Disabled Artists Networking Community, and as Shirley just said, it's one of our major strands of Triple C in that 360 approach of working grassroots and in schools and with young people right the way up to professionals. One of the reasons why we set the Disabled Artists Networking Community up is because we so truly believe that if we can reflect disability in the arts and in the media, it will change the way that disabled people are treated throughout society. If you're a business owner and you own a small shop, if you are seeing disability on your screens and on stages and in magazines or on all these different mediums, it really will change how we react to disability and what we think about it. So that's always been a really big driving force for us. But more so than that, I think Shirley and I often, I think as disabled people, you kind of get told that representation is the only reason that you should be there. You know, you think, oh, what box can I tick for somebody? Oh, I can represent. But actually, the voices of disabled people will only make this industry richer. And one of the reasons why we created DANK was so we could get this community of artists. We have artists of all art forms. We've got writers, actors, directors, producers, dancers, musicians, brilliant artists from so many different backgrounds, all with disabilities. And by creating DANK, we feel that we're creating this driving force that can go forward into the industry and just educate and help the industry out when at a time when it does need to change. But as Sarah and Julie have both said, this is a time when underrepresented groups risk falling off the radar, and for so many underrepresented groups, we are at the bottom of the list. Disability is really at the bottom of the list, and that's why we are fighting during this time to keep ourselves elevated, because if we don't keep it elevated and keep it on the agenda, it is going to so easily be wiped back off again. Yeah, that's kind of what our driving force, isn't it, Shez?
Yeah, we have 800 disabled artists on our database, so people can find us anywhere. And our hope is that as those people go out and start making ripples in the industry, which they really are, then it starts to make such a fundamental change. But what's so important is the grassroots of work. Lots of our disabled artists are saying they're terrified that they've just started to get their foot in the door and that door is going to be shut, because people, I mean, we've not managed to break through this fear of employing somebody with a disability, the fear of getting something wrong, the fear of going, oh, does it cost more? How do I do that? How do I do that creatively? People still aren't seeing it as a creative additional layer. They're still seeing it as a fearful, might be a problem, which it never is once you get a disabled person in that room. But I think what our artist fears are is that we will start being seen as, well, we're struggling anyway, let's take disability off the agenda for now. And exactly like what you're saying, Sarah, people are using other jobs to maintain this, whereas if with a disability, it's very difficult to find a job anyway. You know, our statistics are much more. So it's that thing about going, okay, please just keep us on the agenda, put us on the agenda on day one of going back. That's what we did. We started DANK, A Time for Hope, as soon as COVID, as soon as we shut down, we went online and started having these discussions, because we have to see it as a time for hope. We have to see it, as you say, as a reset. Let's just have everybody in the room from the start, have all those voices, because all those voices together make such a difference. And the arts makes, we over this few years just of doing Triple C, the difference you've seen in, you know, having a young person come into a room who wouldn't even dare come in the room, to presenting on camera 2 days later, to hearing that they've never socialized before, that they're going away on events a couple of months later. Arts has such a creative impact on people's lives, and the fear is if we just do it to these big venues, where's all the community work that's often never heard about, but is often people's stepping stones and ladders up, isn't it, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, and again, as Sarah said, for a lot of people, we just think the arts, or we think, you know, National Theatre or the Opera House, again, fantastic, brilliant venues that of course we need, but we just need to remind ourselves of all of these, not only smaller venues and smaller organisations, but people that run groups for the community, that by that being stripped away, the knock-on effect that has to somebody's life. Just going back onto what Shez mentioned then about the young people that we work with, we really do, and I'm sure there's people listening to this that work with young people with disabilities that see the knock-on effect that drama and the arts can have as well. But we've worked with young people that would literally maybe only have sort of 5 or 6 words vocabulary when we would start working with them, and within a few weeks, by putting them in role play and putting them in situations that they've never experienced, but through art and through drama, it unlocks this other part. And we've had young people whose vocabulary has just shot up, how they've interacted with their friends and their family, and they're the things that I think we're forgetting about at this time. there's going to be a lot of people wanting this money. That's the headline, isn't it? There's going to be a lot of people that want their bit of this money, and we just have to make sure that our underrepresented groups, that, as I say, that are already at the bottom of the priority list, we can't have them shoved off the radar. We need to keep them elevated, and yeah, let's not go back to normal. Let's go forward to better, and make sure that we go back to a really inclusive world, because it's our opportunity. And that's why we called it a time for hope, isn't it, Shez? We called this whole period, and I know that can be difficult sometimes because it has been such a hard time for so many people, but we really did believe it was so important to see this as a period of hope, that this might be our opportunity to change how things were.
Yeah, we set up everything we set up because we didn't want our younger selves to the next generation to go through that journey of never seeing yourself on a screen, you know, going to a theatre or whatever and not being included, or reasons why you can't join in. So let's just start again. Let's let everybody in and learn together. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to know all the answers. Just stop saying no.
And I'm just wondering if people, if there was disabled actors out there, how do they get in touch with you? How do they know about you at Dank? Do you have a website that we could shout out now?
Yeah, you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. If you Google us, we will come up, and you will, I think on our Dank Twitter is the joining for the men.
Yeah, Dank, if you go on Twitter and go on at Dank _Manc, DANCMANC, Dank Manc on Twitter, that's where you'll be able to find all the information about joining.
Amazing. And as you quite rightly said, that this crisis has kind of intensified all of the existing inequalities and prejudices, and it really is. They talk about in disaster situations it being a great leveler. We've talked about how that is really not true so many times on this programme, because you're right, those who are the most well-resourced, the most well-connected, with kind of HR departments or fundraising departments are there ready to go, and people are saying this on the comments, like working class people need community centres, and the arts is part of that, and that people have forgotten about the importance of community development through the arts. But if you are, you know, if you have grown up with the last decade of austerity, you might not understand that that was once a thing, that there was a community centre at the end of your road where you could go and take part in a free workshop with this amazing artist or actor facilitator. And so maybe we need like a whole new campaign, and you can tell me if this is already happening and the People's Assembly can plug it, to explain to people that have never experienced that what it could be like. I don't know if Shirley, you've got anything to say on that before I move to our final.
No, sorry, we don't have anything at the moment, but yes, definitely. I think that's the thing. I think it's about exactly what Sarah's saying, make the arts more accessible for everyone. I know, so sometimes the inclusion of disability enables new access paths for many people that you've never even thought of. Putting somebody in with a disability where tends to make it more accessible for everybody else as well, because people's brains stop thinking of everybody else in the room. You stop being a centre focus. But yes, I think for me, definitely the arts is so important to connect with every human being who we can, because people have a perception of the arts and it's not actually what it can do for in your brain, your processes, your thinking, your identity is massive.
And that campaign that you said, Laura, it really is, it is about just stripping everything back and keeping it really, really simple. One of the biggest reasons why the barriers are so high for disabled people accessing the arts, either at a professional level or at grassroots level, is because of fear. People are riddled with fear of getting it wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't know how to use that terminology. And we get it. We know that fear is there. We hear you. But what we're saying is we need to stop using that as an excuse. And what we really need to make sure is that when there are organisations or people and places out there that are desperate for a further excuse, you know, fear is one excuse, they're desperate for another one, we cannot let what has just gone on with the pandemic be another excuse. So it really is, it's about tearing everything back and saying, we promise you it is easy, and as at the disabled community, we will help, we will hold your hand, we will be there to make sure that not that you get it right, because there is no right or wrong, but that you are moving in the right direction. We don't expect anyone to go off and do this without our support, so we will support the industry to do that.
Thank you honestly so much for taking us through that. I would love people to share this, because what I've heard so far certainly taught me so much. I feel like I want to go to the theatre. It's the point of the programme, isn't it? Like they're not open yet, and you know we do have a lot of anxiety about how we get those establishments back up and running. As you say, especially those, you know, smaller venues in the heart of communities, it's so important. I'm going to come to our final speaker before we come to some of your questions. So Samina Hussain is a theatre director and community practitioner, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. It is over to you for, I suppose, the final kind of uninterrupted word of the evening.
Thank you very much, Laura. First of all, can I just say what an honour it is to be on a panel with such amazing women, and yeah, thank you so much for your passion and drive, and it's just been such an inspiring 41 minutes. I guess what I'm going to talk about is slightly different, and it's basically I want to share some of the thoughts that I've had during lockdown as an artist and a creative. So I've always done theatre, like never anything else, and one thing that I knew it was a big part of my life, and one thing that I realized quite early on in the lockdown was actually it's way bigger than what I thought it was. It's such a part of my identity. It's the way I function in the world. It's the way I connect with people. It's the way that I want the world to be a better place, and theatre is my choice of weapon. That is how I make things work. And one of my fears, which I think all of us share that fear, is there were certain barriers in place way before the pandemic for marginalized voices and unheard voices, and those barriers are still in place and are probably stronger and larger than they were before the pandemic. And I was really concerned about that. And actually, and I think things have shifted as the weeks have gone on, but if this is a time for us to reset and restructure and build a new future, new world, then those voices have to be present. Like we can't like come up with a new system and then go, oh, hold on a second, we forgot. Like it's really worrying for me. And I think it's at the same time, I think it's a great opportunity for us to make those changes, to take a risk. And being a person of colour in white spaces is another thing that really, I realized how much of my adult life I have spent in white spaces just so I could do theatre. And just it's just been, and it's quite difficult for me to articulate how I'm feeling now, because I don't want it to be a downer, but I think it's important to acknowledge what it is, especially if, gosh, this is sorry. I'm just glad that I can just see the six of you, but there's thousands of people probably watching.
It's fine. Honestly, take your time to, you know, get it right in your own head. Yeah.
I think it's, especially if we're going to restart, and there's and I come from a really small town in West Yorkshire, and I think that has been another thing, being back here and reconnecting with the architecture of the town and walking around and seeing the communities and certain memories coming back as an artist, as a young person. And I was going, actually, for me, it's interesting, actually, what is it about us that is hard to reach? Like, and that's the question that's been going over and over in my mind, going, actually, why are we so hard to reach? I really don't get it. Like, this is the safest space in lockdown for me. Like, I'm so grateful that this is where I'm having my lockdown. I'm like, what is it? Why do we as a community feel like we don't have a right to be in those spaces? Like, and it's made me question, why am I doing theatre? Like, why have I dedicated my life to theatre when it is so taxing and costing me so much? Like, and you know, there was like a few weeks where I was like, why have you chosen this profession, woman? Like, what are you doing? And you know, I spent weeks on it going, like, do I really want to do this? And actually, what I realized, I was like, theatre for me, like, it's because it works. And as we've all said, it helps us connect, understand. Storytelling is so important, so powerful. It's not a treat, it's not entertainment. It's a way for us to belong and be together, to bear witness, to have a shared experience. So therefore, it's not the art form that is a problem. For me, it's the system that we're placed in that causes us the problems. And I think it's really important that we if we do want a new change, for everything not to be reactionary. I'm really sorry, my 3-year-old niece has just walked in and announced that she needs the toilet. Brilliant. So sorry, what was I saying? Oh gosh, this is so bad. Anyway, yeah, like I think if we do want to restart and build from the beginning, like I think it's important that we look back on what we've also achieved, like what works, and get those voices in the room, like who, like, I mean, such brilliant people sat here saying amazing things. Like those voices have to be present because they know what they're talking about. Let's not second guess and take a risk. And sorry, I'm just aware of time. And the other thing that I also want to, I think that we should keep in mind is like when we do return, to acknowledge those of us who are marginalized, who, and especially those traumas that have resurfaced, or realizing everything's amplified, like realizing how you're being made to feel other or less. And some of us, like I'm come from a really, and I speak from a very privileged place, like I've got food on the table, I've got a roof over my head, I'm articulate, confident, all of these things enough. I've got those tools in place to work that out for myself and have a really supportive network around me. But like when we do return, like how do we hold a space for each other? Like, let it not be about, like you said, producing work and making things. Like, first of all, like be a space to care for each other, like be a community hub, like hold each other. I think that's the thing, like, and to not devalue the humanness in each other. Like, don't turn us into more products and having to do the best next thing. It's about that human connection that there is. Thanks, guys.
I mean, where do we even start? I mean, you've moved me, and honestly, I mean, how you kept going when my toddler interrupts and announces the toilet, it's like, okay, I thought you can tell you're a professional performer, and I'm professional.
Sorry, just to say there are other adults present in the house, and I've just let 3-year-olds to go.
Listen, my little boy is currently crying to go to bed, and other people are having to take care of that too. It is the nature of lockdown, isn't it? We've got so much going on, and obviously some are mothers and things like that, and we're just honestly so grateful that you could be here tonight. And what you said was just so moving. Like it was like a quote a second, and I was trying to get it all down, Samina. But I think the commodification of the arts, so it being something that you like purchase, has turned it into that notion that it is a treat and that it is exclusionary in some senses. And I think that's why public funding is so important to working class communities, because there is so many people that just could never, ever afford, even if it's a penny or a pound, to set foot through that door, especially with the hardship that is taking place over the last decade and that is about to ensue. So many people sending love for what you just said, by the way, and for the evening overall. People are saying that, yes, call out those excuses. Thank you so much for supporting us all. Great discussion. Thanks so much. This is so focused. Somebody's asked, and maybe this is where we'll start, it's kind of a profession specific question. What should graduates coming out of drama school do? Now, both actors and technicians. And I suppose we can widen that to kind of other artistic fields. And Samina, can I come straight back to you, because you waited a long time to speak, and I'd like to hear you again right now, if that's okay.
I think because in terms of, I would say reach out to like arts organizations that are around, like build those relationships, not to underestimate the power and strength in networks and connections. And that for me, I would say that would be a starting point, like reach out, like what inspires you, like use this time to, even though the work might not be coming, but use this time to, as in, like, see, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to pursue this? Like really use it as a time for self-reflection and to build like a mind map of what kind of work do you want to make? Who do you want to connect with? What stories do you want to tell? Where in the country do you want to be based, or in the world? Like, use this time in that sense. And I know it's not the most, I think there's productive ways to use that time, I would say. And there are organisations out there and arts organisations who are making work and are looking for artists. And I think, and also to co-create or to talk to each other, like find your own community, your own tribe. Like this is that time, like who do you connect with? And that may be artists, it may not be, maybe producers, it may be, I don't know, lawyers, like who are your people? Because that's what's going to support you along the way, because we don't know what's going to happen. So self-care is absolute paramount.
Thank you so much. And Julie, could you come back in at this point, because you've sat through that all. I imagine you enjoyed, if that's all right to say that, as much as I did, everybody's contributions. But where do we start? I mean, the key of this has to be organising amongst everybody in this sector. I know I keep saying sector, I know it's sectors, but where do people start with this kind of fight back?
Yeah, it's a really hard question, obviously, because we've had to recalibrate really, really quickly, you know, because the campaign was to get some sort of rescue fund, and now it's about where that money goes and how it's distributed. I would say that you can attach it. I'm very aware that in talking about all this stuff, we're talking about grassroots organisations almost as a separate thing to the big buildings, you know, and it has to be said that all the big organisations, like, you know, my very beloved theatre is Royal Exchange in Manchester, as everybody knows, and they haven't closed for business. They've been working throughout, supporting the Elders Company and the Young Company. I know Leeds will be the same. You know, there's all these organisations are doing all these amazing outreach work, so it's worth connecting with those companies now. You know, they are aware of the huge well-being crisis that is about to be on us, that we're in now, and that will only get worse, and they're there to support you, you know, and actually, you know, even though times are tough, those buildings do have the resources to do that, you know, as well as organisations like Dank, you know. And Sarah is a really good person to talk to about this, because Sarah's been running surgeries for self-employed people to help them access the grants and funds that they're entitled to. Graduates are in a particularly difficult position because they don't have the proof that they've been an artist or somebody in the industry, because they've been in education. And that's, I think, I might be wrong in this, Sarah, but that's a prerequisite of applying for any of the grants or funding that's coming up. There's also a really hard thing where you're not allowed to apply for some of the grants that have been sort of created recently, like the Sam Mendes Netflix fund, because you're not allowed to have over a certain amount in your bank. But, you know, as a self-employed person, you have to put tax aside. You don't pay it at the point of delivery. So that immediately precludes you getting any help in that way. So I think Sarah would be a really good person to talk to about the sort of the action in keeping afloat, because survival is key in this. But organising, campaigning. If you look through Twitter and Facebook, there are a lot of organisations that are campaigning together to make things better, and, you know, and join your union. Equity, especially with this new General Secretary, Paul Fleming, is going to be a force to be reckoned with.
I agree. Sarah, there's a question for you, really, and then a specific one on Dank too, so I'll come to that in just a second. Somebody said, what would you advise a young person to do now to get into the arts with it being so commodified?
He's watching me, he's fine.
I don't know. That's my honest answer. I don't know. And I think
anyone can answer. Anyone can answer.
Well, part of it is because we just don't know what's going to happen. Like, my hope is that things ultimately change and that actually there will be much more opportunities, but actually we don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's really difficult, because it's like you want to use this time to the best of your ability, like get your ducks in a row, make sure you've got enough money in your bank account to pay tax, all of that stuff, or just using the education that you've got and trying to like funnel it into a career. But we don't know what will survive. And so I think, like Samina was saying, ultimately you've got to sort of look after yourself for a bit. So just think about actually who are you? What is your artistic voice? Because that's sort of the first thing you need to figure out as an artist, a creative producer, or whatever role you are. What do you want to bring and get out? What do you want that to be? Because in figuring that out, that will enable you, I think, to grow and be more ready for those, like it's really scary talking to people in big buildings, and it doesn't have to be big buildings, it could be little buildings, or getting your first participatory job, or running a workshop, or like that stuff can be scary. But if you've figured out who you are and who you are as an artist and what your artistic voice is, then you are automatically going to feel more ready in those spaces. But I think, like, we're saying it's shut, but it's not really. Like, there's like Julie was saying, there's participatory stuff that is never shut. That's never the stuff we hear about as the arts. It's always like, oh, it's the big shiny shows, Warhorse, Matilda, whatever is going on, Six, woo. But actually, in those same buildings, consistently, there are communities who are keeping each other alive, who are enabling each other to thrive. And that's the kind of real stuff that's happening, and it's not the shiny stuff. And it's so I think that also kind of maps into what is your artistic voice. Anyway, sorry, I started by saying I don't know, and then I went off.
And then you did know. So, Samina, I'm bringing you in next before the question for Dank.
I was going to say, and it's quite following on, because I put my hand up and then Sarah said some of the things I was going to say. But okay. I think it's also like to think of, don't think now's the only time to like get your foot in. Like, theatre's going to happen. We're going to sort it out. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to get there. So along with finding your artist, like, think of it like you're prepping yourself, like get your tools ready, what you need. Like, you're going to come and join this like force, or we're going to fight this, and you're going to like be in the next cohort. So like, just prep yourself for it. Like, don't worry that it's over. Like, if you don't get in now, that it's not going to happen. And the other thing, like, about reaching, like, if you want to connect with people, like, get in touch. Like, they're just people, and if they say no, they say no, and you can go find the next person you want to link up with. Now's the time to do that, because it's so possible to connect across the country. So yeah, give yourself permission to reach out to people.
Such good advice. Rona has asked for both Sheryl and Melissa, what are your plans for Dank post-COVID? Will you be setting up a support group for arts freelancers who would like to apply for funding or anything like that? I don't know if you'd like to just say a little bit about that.
We're continually growing Dank to be a community, and we feed back from what the community needs is how we create our next pieces of work. And we're creating a website, which means a centralized resource where, so everybody knows if they want to look for any freelancer with a disability, any creative, you can find them on there. So it's a place to find us. That's definitely something we can talk about. It's currently not in our business plan, but we're always up for listening to what people want and need, because that's our business model in a way, is to feed off what our next steps are, and we always plan 2 stages ahead to support those.
It's worth saying as well that Dank is, we really do try to act as a central resource. So the idea is that we constantly hear as a reason why people can't employ disabled people or cast disabled actors or employ disabled people off screen is, oh, I wanted to, I just didn't know where to find them. And so a really key thing for us at Dank is to go, let's just eliminate that, because I'm not saying it's not an excuse, it probably is an excuse, but we just want to find the answer to that. So in creating the website, in creating Dank and strengthening it, if we don't know the answer, there'll be one of our 800 members that may know the answer. We do regular mail outs. So in terms of funding and stuff, if it's not something we can facilitate directly, we will be able to hold those conversations, and we'll continue to act as that central resource that people can come to, and we can include everyone in the conversations.
Amazing. Does anyone know, this has been asked of you all, by the way, if freelancers can benefit from the rescue package, like as individuals? Is that included? Sorry, I don't know this either. Sarah?
I think I might know. So I think that the money that's been announced by the government is not for like individuals and freelancers, but However, it could be if that money is given to a building and that building decides to spend the percentage of the money on the freelancers. So you can't get it directly, but you still can benefit from that money from the kind of trickle down, if you like. But also, Arts Council England have said that the project grants and the grants that have reopened now, because of what the government have announced with that money, they are going to be trying to focus on those kind of organisational and individual grants, so that there's a better, there's more kind of making sure that that money gets to those artists. And like Julie was saying, if you're worried about a form, I can help. I do like a sort of, like Julie was saying, an advice session that essentially just supports people to be able to formulate their ideas, to put in a form, because it's sort of a skill, and it's not a skill that we all have. And sometimes you've got this amazing, incredible idea, but you just don't know how to formulate it in the format that they want it in.
Are you all right, Sarah, to pop your details in the chat on the side, and we'll get that out there for people? Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna and Julie, you can come back in. Anyone can come back in. We've got a few minutes left.
Just wanted to say one thing, Laura, just in terms of talking about this, that we've only really touched on education very briefly, and it is really, really key to this, because arts education is being desperately underfunded and cut back, and has been for some time now. And with the introduction of EBAC, which is basically the sort of like a conglomeration of all the art subjects into one, what's happening in state education is that young people aren't getting the opportunity to do very practical subjects. So all those actors who were absolutely rubbish at school and skived every single lesson, but suddenly, because they were just got up and took the mick in a drama class and were brilliant at it, and now Hollywood film stars, they are no more. There is no way that person can survive because of the amount of academic work they have to do as part of drama now. The same with music, the same with visual arts. It's and for me, it seems deliberate, because it is no coincidence that a drama school a school like Eton, a drama school, that's Freudian slip, a school like Eton plows absolutely thousands and thousands of money into the arts every year. And it's not because they want to produce a whole generation of Eddie Redmaynes and Benedict Cumberbatches, it's because they know the importance of the arts across education, that it gives you confidence, that it gives you connections with people, that it sets you up in all different areas of your life. It doesn't mean that you will go on to be an actor, musician, artist. It just gives you a well-rounded education in all subjects, and that is being eroded by the day in state education. And I would absolutely implore everybody to keep an eye on that, because what's going to happen and what we're in danger of is a future where all the voices that are powerful in TV and film and in theatre are going to be from a very, very narrow stratum of society. So all those working class voices are going to be silenced, so right across, and that's intersectional, it's all the underrepresented groups within the working class as well, and we're going to end up with very boring stories, actually.
Less talent, much less talent. And it just shows that it doesn't matter for People's Assembly regulars, if you like, it doesn't matter what area of society we're talking about. The system perpetuates those inequalities, and the crisis does too. And this is where I'm going to ask you to kind of give us your final rally call to all of the panelists to conclude this show tonight. Look, the People's Assembly asked you all on because we are in solidarity with you. We were anxious. We wanted to campaign alongside you for your sector too. And we want to know what you want from the movement. So you have just outlined some very significant pre-existing problems, some things that you're very concerned about for the future. What do you need from the movement? What do you want from activists? And Julie's first bit of advice was, of course, join your union. But is there anything else that we can do as a collective? I'm going to come, who would like to go first? Just volunteer yourself. Okay, Melissa, go for it.
It's not a huge one, and it's not one that will put money in the bank, sadly. But I do think that we're coming into a time. I think the arts has always sadly mistaken passion and privilege, and I think that that's going to happen even more now. That, you know, if you are not in a privileged enough situation to be able to have the time, because you might have to have 2 or 3 other jobs, you may not be able to jump on things as quickly as other people. And I think we're continually told that that's down to, you just need to be more passionate, or you know, the passionate ones are going to make it. And I think just for all of the working class people out there, or the people that have to take on 2 or 3 jobs and will miss out on opportunities, like, just please be reminded that we absolutely stand with you. And so many of us, despite how many times you will be told that it's lack of passion, the majority of us really do know that it's got nothing to do with passion, and it is circumstance and sadly privilege. And if enough of us sort of collate our voices, we can yeah, I really think we can change that round, so people can see that passion is the driving force, and privilege shouldn't be the driving force anymore.
Sarah?
I am going to pick on what Samina, I'm pointing that way because on my screen that's where you are, but that might not be for everyone. Anyway, what Samina was saying, like, check in on each other. Like, this isn't just a soul thing. We're all going through it. I think check in on each other, and pull resources. So kind of building on what Melissa was saying, like, actually, could you have you got a group of you who can champion each other and can kind of let each other know, like WhatsApp groups and telling each other about things that are going on? Or if one person can go to, I don't know, a webinar or something, you like skill share that thing. So actually we're all getting a bit more access to stuff, and we're not waiting for someone else to give it to us. We're sharing it with each other. And yeah, check in, because it's really hard. Yeah,
really hard out there, honestly. Sarah, thank you so much. Samina?
Oh my gosh, mine gone blank then.
Shall I come back?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, not a problem. So Shirley?
I think look, come together, but also look locally and nationally about keeping this united voice, because the local organisations just sort of say, can I help, you know, push some of the work you're doing. Just keep reminding people let's just keep asking, and let's keep including everybody, and keep reminding everybody to be included until that change is done.
Samina?
Your voice matters. Like, you have a story that is worth telling. You have a right to be in those spaces. You have a right to be in theatre. Like, I think that like, I wish I knew that way before then, when I did know that. It would have made such a massive difference. Like, you have a right to these stories, to tell your voice. Like, it is so important to have that self-belief and self-confidence, no matter where you're from, how old, what part of the country, the world you're from. And the other thing, be kind. Like, in today's time, like, want to be radical, is to be kind to yourself and those around you.
Thank you so much. And I'll leave the last word to Julie, please, of the evening.
Well, I suppose in terms of the movements, and what we would ask of the movement would be an acknowledgement of the art's role in changing a society, and the artist's role in changing a society. I think sometimes there is this idea of a class divide, where, as I said at the beginning, you know, the arts are seen as some sort of lofty middle class pursuit, a treat, you know. And actually, as I think every panelist has said tonight, the arts are a way of making sense of the world. My greatest teacher and mentor was South African, and set up the first multiracial theatre company in South Africa at the height of apartheid in 1970s South Africa. And it was an illegal theatre, and they were raided every few days, and the black actors would have to do their day jobs, go there at night, and when they were raided they'd just pretend to be cleaners, because that's the way. But they were putting on plays that had important things to say about that society, and it had a part to play in overthrowing that government. It did. It's not an overstatement to say, and art does. And it's really, really important that working class voices are part of that struggle to change the world. And I'd like more acknowledgement, really, not from the People's Assembly, who've always been amazing in terms of like knowing the power of music and theatre and art and film to change things, but it really can. So yeah, some solidarity in terms of that, really, and not seeing it as something for, as I keep reading on Twitter, love is this fantastic sort of like retro 80s term. I'm just like, it's about so much more than that.
Honestly, thank you so much. Like, you've really provoked me actually tonight to think about my activism and the emphasis I place on the arts, and it cannot be seen as like an appendage to everything that we do, something that's like a nice little extra on an event. The power that the arts has to consciousness raise about our conditions is phenomenal. Can I just say thanks, Julie, to you? You are the People's Assembly President in Manchester. That is such a great thing for us. We thank you so much for that. And let us connect our struggles. That would be my kind of final message for tonight, is that whatever the kind of artists movement wants to ask of us, we will be in solidarity with your demands and your struggles, be that over terms and conditions of contract of employment, over the way in which you experience your work, over the funding that you get, over the access that working class people have to the arts, and anything else. We will be there. If you are an artist and you are thinking, actually, I would like to help the People's Assembly connect that struggle, I'm an artist and political, get involved with us at the People's Assembly. You can find your local group by WhatsApping direct message in the Facebook page, the People's Assembly Facebook page. You're obviously now going to go and like, because you've been so inspired by every single person that has contributed tonight. You can find, if you just want to like a bit easier, you can email local groups at thepeoplesassembly.org.uk. Don't forget, we've got Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival 2020, Friday the 17th at 7 p.m, a great panel, and there's so much art and in that festival if nobody's been there before. Just thank you so much. It is not too late to share this live, so if you think, goodness me, that was so powerful, I'd really love it if my auntie or my sister could hear this, tag them in the comments, share the live. You will increase the views on this exponentially. Solidarity to every single person working as an actor at the moment, or in theatre, or a director, whatever sector you are in. The People's Assembly is in solidarity with you. Thank you so much to Sarah, to Shirley, to Melissa, to Julie, and to Samina. You have been unbelievable. Good night, everybody, and see you next week.